Welcome to my house. I'm going to watch a Doctor Who story nominated by a friend of mine. I've asked them to tell me what it is they love about it, and I have to guess what their favourite things are.
Hello, I'm Darrell MacLaine. I'm a voice actor, impressionist, composer and clown stroke daft bugger. You might remember me at the start of lockdown. I did this. I'll stick a pony in my pocket. And that was me. And I'm wearing the same jumper I wore in that video, which is a big clue to what I'll be talking about today. I would love to say that was all planned and deliberate, but it's just coincidence really. Toby Hadoke is not my personal puppet master. However, I'm here today to talk about my favourite Doctor Who story. And when I tell you what my favourite Doctor Who story is, you will say, really? Is there something wrong with him? And I will say, yes and yes, because my favourite Doctor Who story is The Chase from 1965. Really? The Chase, really?
Well, hello, or good morning, should I say, for the first time in one of these. I normally wait till everybody's gone to bed and record late into the night. And I woke up this morning and I was sort of wasting time flicking through social media, getting depressed at the state of the world. I thought, why am I doing this? I could be watching Doctor Who. So I don't think I'm going to be able to do the whole thing because this house will become a hive of activity soon. But I thought I'd begin with this story because it's a six-parter, so we've got a lot to get through. I hope you've got it lined up and are ready to press play in 3, 2, 1, now. Now, I'm fascinated by this for a number of reasons. Hello, thanks for joining me. Darrell MacLaine is somebody I have never met. He's somebody whose work I very much admired on Twitter. We followed each other, and I sort of, I was going to say reached out, but that's a very modern and slightly Americanized phrase that I think would stick in my throat were I to say it without doing it as I have just then, invoking it. But I sent him a message, and he has sent me lots of very big files, obviously, which I've only seen the beginning of, and he seems to have joined in with gusto. Now, this, of course, is at the end of the Space Museum. And of course, I remember seeing in the credits of the Space Museum, you know, Dalek and Dalek voice, and I thought, oh, well, that must just be the Dalek that the Doctor hides in the Space Museum. But of course, it's not. It's the lead into the funky jazz sitch that is The Chase. It's a funny score. I think I have to do full disclosure. I haven't seen this story for years, and for many years, I had great joy in being, well, not joy, in being furious with it. I think because I'd expected, it was the Hartnell Dalek story that I wanted to see because we didn't have Dalek Master Plan. Doctor and the Daleks and, or the Dead Planet, or, you know, the first one, and Dalek Invasion of Earth, we had approximations of in the Cushing movies. But this seemed very serious as well. You know, it was like an epic chase. God, I love Maureen O'Brien. I haven't had to move this cushion. Viewers, listeners to the podcast, you can't see. I'm actually leaning on a cushion that has Ian's Monsters from Outer Space book design cover on it, and I haven't had to move that especially to put it into shot. It was here this morning. And I've just straightened it out slightly so that you can see it, but I haven't put it here especially. It's actually the life I lead, and I think because when I first saw The Chase, it wasn't the sort of serious space epic I was hoping for, because I expected Doctor Who to be very serious. Because I wanted Doctor, even though I'd always had fun watching Doctor Who, I grew up with Tom Baker. As I discovered Doctor Who as a youth, it was important for me to be, that it be terribly serious. That's as wrong-headed, I think, as other people who grew up with it with retro, who like it because it's a bit naff. I've never quite been able to side with those people because I don't know, because Doctor Who was always terribly serious, and I'm not sure I can get on board with the sort of arch distant. Oh, it's marvelous because it's terrible. I wasn't born. I said it in my show. I say it in my Doctor Who scarf. I wasn't born postmodern. I like Doctor Who because it was good. I love Ian's jacket here, and I remember seeing that in a few photos. But it's a jacket. It's a shirt, isn't it? It's a stripy shirt. But I remember that being in some of the photos in some of the Peter Haining books. I think there's a rare photo in one that's of a sort of staged. I think Ian's lying down and various other people, including an Iridian, are crowded round him. Some of the black and white publicity stills for this era make the shows look amazing. But so when I got Doctor Who videos, the fact that this had the audacity of trying to be funny, which it does. I mean, that whole sequence with Vicky being redundant is sort of fairly lame comedy, but Maureen O'Brien does it very well, and it's to sort of show that the time travellers are. Well, no, I don't think it's designed for that. I think it's designed to, have a bit of fun at the beginning of the episode. But it does show the lovely sort of dynamic between this quartet, which I think is one of the great appeals of the era. And this is, of course, Ian and Barbara's last hurrah. And I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to go to London 1965 quite yet. And this is pure padding, but in a sense, although it does give us the driver for the story when they see the Daleks in a bit, but actually I think as a kid, the idea that they would see Gettysburg and they would see the actually I think that's quite thrilling, even though it's got nothing to do with the story. The idea that you could sort of touch history is quite a beguiling one. Beguiling alert. And Robert Marsden, who plays Abraham Lincoln, I remember thinking of him as, because I'd never seen him in anything else, never seen his name written down, and thinking, oh, he's just one of those actors that sort of came and went, and there'd never be any chance of finding him or writing to him, and I never did. But I discovered when he died that yes, he was actually an actor that was around for a while, but he was Abraham Lincoln guy. This wasn't just casting somebody you've worked with before because you go, oh yes, Robert does a good American accent or whatever. He did Abraham Lincoln on other occasions. If he didn't do a one-man show, he played. No, I think he might have done. But it was this. So this is the equivalent of Simon Callow as Dickens, or if you were to do one about Field Marshal Montgomery getting the guy from I Was Monty's Double. This was actually we got a beeline to the Abraham Lincoln guy, which. So, and anything you have as an actor that makes you castable, one wonders if we need somebody to play a lawyer. We get Robert Marsden. No, he just does Abraham Lincoln. So it's a curse as well as a blessing. But I was pleased that, when Doctor Who had Abraham Lincoln, they had Abraham Lincoln guy. I love the dynamic between these people. I like all of the people in the TARDIS at this point. And gosh, gone is the dynamic of the early years when sort of Jacqueline Hill bashes the thing, and then William Hartnell does too. Oh, it's Queen Elizabeth I. Oh, and of course Shakespeare and Bacon. So again, I think if you're a kid learning history, this is this is amazing stuff. And Roger Hammond and Hugh Walters, and I didn't realise when I first watched this that these are two great thespians. Hammond looking svelte here, who was better known as a sort of rotund character actor who appeared in all sorts of things, and I think a Legal in General actor and lots of Merchant Ivory type stuff, playing slightly plump men of the cloth, a great character actor, apparently a very, very lovely man. Lived in the same village as Wanda Ventham and Donald Pickering. That's my fact about Roger Hammond. And he's Dr. Runciman in Mordred Undead. So two very small parts in Doctor Who that aren't reflected, don't reflect actually the sort of size of his career subsequently, where he, there's a lot of one-scene actors in the 1960s we never hear from again, but his career in film and television was fantastic. And of course Shakespeare is Hugh Walters, Runcible the Fatuous, and Vogel in Revelation of the Daleks. A wonderfully light, slightly effete character actor who, with a lovely gag that Shakespeare didn't come up with, the idea of Hamlet. That's rather a nice, neat gag, and it's full of terrific actors. And I love Hugh Walters. I never had the pleasure of either Hammond or Walters, and I would have loved to have done. I think Ian McKellen wrote Roger Hammond's obit in the Independent, and said when he last saw him in hospital, Roger Hammond was sort of saying, "Oh, it's sad that I'm, going to die, because it's been such fun." And you go, "Oh, I love that attitude." And I think you could probably do that as an actor in those days. You could just spend your life having such fun, because work was plentiful. Never come across Richard Coe, the presenter. That's all he does in this. But because of course the big news is the Beatles are in Doctor Who, and I remember when the BSB, the 54 Who weekend, and they did a thing of, these are the famous people that have been in Doctor Who, and the Beatles, and I was sort of went, you sort of cheated here, because it's just film of them in something else. Ian's funky dancing, that might be the best thing from episode 1. Yeah, I'm a bit of a dad dancer as well, and do you know what? When you're a dad dancer, it feels good, and that's all that matters. It does no one any harm, bar perhaps your children in a public place, but I'm a dad dancer, and I bloody love it. So there, and I could tell you that because you're in my house and I'm wearing a dressing gown. I don't think we have any secrets. The Beatles played classical music. That's a lovely gag. Get with it. I love Ian Chesterton. I love Barbara Wright, and I love Vicky. We're very lucky to have such game, joyous actors in these parts. That whole thing was frippery, but I was actually rather charmed by it. Where once I would have been furious. That's a great shot of the TARDIS on film in a. And this is clever from Richard Martin, this shot of the Doctor over the TARDIS console, because the TARDIS console is not there. In order to maintain maximum studio size, the TARDIS, we've just got the doors. Very clever from Richard Martin, with whom I have a tricky relationship. Again, I remember, forgive me, I'm just being honest when I talk about how angry I was as a young man. And I mean, I wasn't a delinquent. I didn't pull the wings off flies. My anger was purely internalized. It manifested itself perhaps in psoriasis, but that's a more complicated story. But my love for Doctor Who was always couched in a worry that other people wouldn't take it seriously, and other people wouldn't like it, and that it would be axed, or that it would never come back, depending on when and where we were. But I wanted approval, and so it meant it was more important to me that therefore that everybody would love Doctor Who, and so if Doctor Who was ever silly or looked naff, it made me furious. Whereas I sort of wish I'd just sort of dived in and enjoyed it. Although I think I did. My fury was part of my appreciation of it. Because it didn't mean I didn't watch Doctor Who every day and rewatch stories I thought that made me cross. This stuff on location amused me. This because Ian and Vicky are not played by William Russell and Maureen O'Brien. In fact, Vicky is played by Barbara Joss, who plays Nemone, the the Opterer who stops up the wall in the Web Planet. And it amuses me because on the DVD commentary for this, Maureen O'Brien, I think on her first DVD commentary, when it gets to that bit, goes, "Do you know what? This is the only bit of Doctor Who I remember doing." It's like, well, that's not you, and you didn't do it. So it just goes to show that sometimes a moderator is very important, although Peter Purvis moderated that, but he wasn't to know that, that she'd say she'd remember a bit she didn't actually do. And it does sometimes make me question my whole life's work. Why are you asking people who don't remember things? I don't care. I've been very lucky to do it. So I'm hoping this watch of the chase will teach me to chill out a bit about Doctor Who when it doesn't live up to my childhood imaginings. But Richard Martin, as I say, I had quite a complex relationship with, because he was always talked of as this sort of film director in sort of writings about Doctor Who. That's good, a tentacle. But his studio work is very ambitious, and I would say it doesn't always come off. But he had the audacity to do interviews quite early on where he sort of went, Doctor Who wasn't ambitious enough and it wasn't very good, and sort of basically I was too good for it and Verity Lambert was wrong. And again, a bit like Maureen O'Brien, where she would in Doctor Who magazine do interviews going, I'm only doing this to plug my book. It seemed like both of them didn't like it and were being disparaging. Then actually, when you have, as I have the pleasure to meet both of them, actually their tone of voice is much more joyous, much more sparky, and in the case of Richard Martin, he's a bit of a mischief maker and an absolute charmer. I love Richard Martin. He's one of my favourite Doctor Who people, even though I spent my childhood being cross with him in his direction. Partially because I was informed by those interviews where, unless everybody said Doctor Who was marvellous and it's so sad you can't see the episodes, I would be like, hang on. Oh, that's very dramatic. And that's a great wheeze. They've got the scene, the screen to look back at great events from the past, and it's actually shown the Daleks are about to chase Doctor Who and his chums. And I like the different coloured Dalek. I think the Daleks look great in black and white. TARDIS. I'm never quite sure about. He does try to mix things up a bit, Richard Martin, sometimes, but I have to say I'm not sure it always. That's a great shot, though. I love that. I think these Daleks look magnificent. There's nothing clunky about the Daleks at all. I can see why they bewitched a generation or two of children. I always find the David Graham voice is unusual. It's not how I imagine the Daleks now. And in fact, they've sort of phased out the deeper voice. But they're both great, aren't they? David Graham and Peter Hawkins. Again, premier voice people, lending the tones to the icons of our youth. And that's a very clever design, that sort of double door system that the Daleks go through into their, I think it's called a DARDIS, isn't it? Of course the Daleks time machine is called a DARDIS. And that's a neat trick, isn't it, where it's the same three Daleks going round and round and round. That's an inventive use of resources. There we go, well done. Door doesn't. Yeah, it's a funny old design. That it's sort of slightly curious, but it works. I like it. So this will hopefully, teach me to love something that's doing what it intended to do. It's not that it's sort of slightly silly by accident. It's slightly silly on purpose. a sort of curious hybrid of, because people will die as the episodes go on, but also it's got sort of comedy larks about it. That's very bold, isn't it? Because they're both face on, those two doubles, but it's an acknowledgement that the film is never going to be good enough quality that you're going to make out their faces. Sort of unthinkable today. Although that said, I seem to recall there's a double for Harry Lloyd in Long Shot and some of the outside sequences in Family of Blood, where he's face on, but it's far enough away that you can't make him out. So actually, it is thinkable today. We still have to overcome the same problems. The sound effects are the hero of so much of 60s Doctor Who. Just this unearthly, ethereal wind here. I think Brian Hodgson, although we all know his name, and we all Doctor Who fans, I think, are comforted by his name, I think he's an undersung hero of 60s Doctor Who. I think the weird, unsettling, alien soundtrack. Doctor Who's never so alien as it is in is in the 1960s, where there's alien worlds aren't just sort of brave new worlds. They're strange. They're odd. They're unsettling. They're alien, rather than people in hats or slightly skew-whiff versions of planet Earth. And I never quite got this story of the it's just suddenly gone dark. Night has fallen in the studio, but I never quite got what this story was here for. So I'm sorry if I'm being thick. Well, apart from the fact that she's setting up the fact that they shouldn't pull the ring. Okay, that's what it's there for. It just seemed to me to spend an awfully long time doing it. But it is almost like they're going, well, we sort of want a Dalek-based cliffhangers, so we've got to do a lot of hanging around. Ian. She's always working, Maureen O'Brien, and she's so delightful. She's so charming. She's such a charming actress. And he's. Don't you want Ian Chesterton to be your school teacher? And of course you'd sort of laugh nervously. That's really, it's sort of mixture of sci-fi and fairy tale, isn't it? You could see the tart going there. But yeah, I've always wanted to see the chase. I remember the approach to the TV50, where celebrations, where we were shown an awful lot of Doctor Who clips on the night, and that was amazing. God, and they didn't stop coming. For some programs, it was just a clip here or there. The Doctor Who compilation was fantastic. I was at a friend's house, and it was so exciting to see all those clips. But there was talk that they might have repeated a whole Doctor Who story, which frankly was what we deserved. It seems quite strange now that they didn't. But the talk was that the Dalek invasion of Earth was in too bad a state to ever be repeated. I don't know quite where that came from. I mean, there are film prints that are a bit knackered, but I don't think Dalek invasion of Earth was one that had ever particularly been officially marked as that or anything. But that was the story in Doctor Who magazine. The Dalek invasion of Earth was in too much of a mess. Oh, it's going to be a tentacle. That's proper peril stuff, isn't it? I thought the tentacle was going to come through the hatch. No, we've just got a close-up. Oh, okay. Oh, it's shutting. It's shutting the hatch. Or it's wafting about, well, the hatch shuts after a bit. Yeah, he is ambitious, Richard Martin, but it doesn't always work. Oh, that's right. The sandstorm's pretty good. But that was quite laboured, wasn't it? The old tentacle, and then the slow shut of the glass panel, and then a sort of high-angled shot of a bit of a monster. Yeah, and they were going to show The Chase as part of TV 50, and it never happened. I remember getting so excited about that because The Chase was the one. It sounded so exciting. You know, it's the Daleks versus the Mechanoids. Didn't realise it was the Daleks versus the Mechanoids from the end of part 5. But again, the episodic stuff seemed really exciting because, and you can see why Terry Nation does it, because comic strip peril is is sort of quite fast paced and can change from week to week or take you from landscape or scenario to landscape and scenario. I think it's a big ask for Doctor Who in the 1960s, where if you have the same sets for 6 weeks, you're going to pull it off much better than having to recreate new ones every week. But they do it, and you can't fault the ambition. And well done, William Hartnell and Jacqueline Hill, for being game enough to get absolutely covered in sand. And if you've had a Dalek rise out of the water memorably at the end of an episode, why not have one rise out of the sand, which is a great image, at the end of the next the next time you do it? And that looks great. Although they did try and pull a Dalek out of the sand on location, and of course it didn't work because sand is really heavy. But there's a great picture of them trying to do that, and it's abandoned. So, what a great image, the Dalek rising out of the sand. Let's have him coughing, because Daleks would cough, because sand makes you cough. Yeah, I think it might undermine the dramatic effect that you're going for. It does make sense, but it is silly. But I think I have to accept Dennis Spooner's name's on the credits. He was a very funny man, a funny comedy writer. Terry Nation's background is in comedy. I can't really being disparaging of comedy, seeing as what I do for a living, quiet at the back. Yeah. That was jolly, wasn't it? That was jolly enough. And it passed the time very quickly and amiably. I think my favourite thing has to be the dynamic between the TARDIS crew. I can't remember if I've chosen that in a Hartnell story before. I've only done Hartnell-wise. I've done The Rescue, which is the story where Vicky and Barbara meet. Ian and Barbara meet Vicky, and now I'm doing the one where they say goodbye to her, and indeed the Doctor. And I may have chosen the dynamic between the TARDIS crew there, but I think I'm allowed it because Vicky is part of that mix now as well. And I just think if you're going to do a first episode that has a sort of comedy, it's basically a few comedy interludes and a few fun looks into history, but really aren't much to do with the story. If you're going to have that, you have to rely on the dynamic of and the regulars don't interact with any other characters. You have to rely on the dynamic of the 4 people that you've got, and they clearly get on. They're clearly working very hard to make it work. There's little touches that all of the actors do that keep it alive. So I am going and also, it's their last story. But I'm going for the dynamic between that peerless, faultless TARDIS quartet. Now I'm intrigued to see what Darrell has done, because he sent me 3 very big files that of course I am not allowed to look at until the choice. So I have chosen, I'm going to write this down because this is a 6-parter and I will forget. I had a book here. I'll write it down in the break. But I'm choosing the TARDIS quartet. What's Darrell chosen?
The first reason I love The Chase, and let's get this out of the way right at the beginning, is its acorn antiqueness. The fact is, loads of things in the production of this story go really badly wrong, and they make it all the way to screen, and they've been left that way for 55 years. And this is brilliant. Well, I know we're supposed to say that, oh, Doctor Who, you know, really, the things about wobbly sets and rubber monsters, actually, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Actually, it was very, very well made for its time, and it was. But the chase on the whole isn't, and that's kind of quite amusing. And I'm sorry if I'm upsetting anyone, but it's actually okay to sit down at Doctor Who and kind of laugh at it as well as with it, and love it, and also kind of take the mick. I've introduced friends to Doctor Who through the chase by saying, let's get this out of the way first. You'll laugh at it, and once you've got through that barrier, you can enjoy anything then on its own terms. And it's worked. It's hilarious. You can actually sit down with friends. Well, not at the moment, but when we can, we'll all sit down together and watch the chase. There are some amazing fluff lines. There's that day for night shot of the Daleks. There's that clock which goes over the screen. There's the Dalek you can see in the corner, which you shouldn't be able to do. There's people making wrong entrances. There are loads of things which are rubbish, but I love them for that. The other thing I will say is, as well as being funny in its own right, and you know, what is Doctor Who for to enjoy? It's an entertainment programme that's entertaining. It's also probably the most instructive piece of Doctor Who about how it was made. Because so many things go wrong, there is no documentary or book that's as insightful into how Doctor Who was made in the 60s as The Chase, because of all the mistakes. You just see it happen on the studio floor. It's like being a fly on the wall. So reason number one, it's acorn antiqueness. Reason...
And you know what? If you were to sit me down and put that theory... certainly in the past I would have refuted it, and I would have been furious with you. And I think it's very instructive, especially in this age of sort of Twitter polarization, where the idea that somebody might enjoy the programme in a different way from you is tantamount to them being tyrants. I'm utterly convinced by Darrell's argument. It does no harm to my enjoyment and the seriousness with which I take Doctor Who. And as I say, I'm not somebody that would normally sort of watch it once removed and sort of with sort of lofty disdain. But that's a great coping mechanism for the chase's faults. I would have enjoyed the chase much more as a kid if I'd loosened up. I'd have enjoyed quite a lot more of my childhood if I'd loosened up. So there's a lesson there, isn't there? Is that Doctor Who isn't always what you want it to be, but it's Doctor Who. Go with it. And if that means sometimes just acknowledging the fact that try as it might, and Richard Martin definitely tried. He wasn't phoning it in. So all of the things that go wrong are because his ambitions were elsewhere. He wouldn't mind a technical fault if it meant that he could get an ambitious shot or pull off an ambitious sequence. And that's a way of approaching making telly. You wouldn't be allowed to now, but the 60s gave you that latitude where technical faults kind of happened and the audience were kind of used to them, and you forgive or you don't. And I'm much more forgiving today than perhaps I was in the past, and I'm better for it. But I still think the coughing Daleks are really stupid idea. I meant, am I not entertained? Let's see what happens in the sands of Iridius in episode 2. But I'm having a jolly morning, thanks to Darrell, who's a game contributor. And that's nice as well, isn't it? That I'm very pleasantly surprised by how people, some I know, some I don't, have reacted to this challenge. And we're about to get sent into total lockdown again. And we need this sort of thing. I need this sort of thing. I'm hoping in throwing it out there to you, it's as helpful to you as it is for me. If not, just get furious with me. But I guarantee you, in 20 years' time, you'll look back and go, no, if I'd loosened up a bit, I'd have enjoyed Toby Hadoke a little bit more. So, hello, people 20 years in the future. I know, finally you appreciate me. Until next time, thanks for watching.